Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Strong Start, Connecting Early Literacy Screening with the Massachusetts Dyslexia Guidelines. We hope you got to take some time off this summer and relax and unwind after the long, strenuous school year. This is a repeat of the webinar, which was done on June 23rd. We are recording this webinar and it will be posted on the Mass Literacy Guide under the top resources page and on our early literacy assessment page, which I will show you a little later on. Our goals for today are to discuss the importance of early literacy screening, to show you where to find our approved screeners, how we chose them, and also show you resources that will help you choose and use your screener, and then finally make connections to and highlight the Massachusetts Dyslexia Guidelines. I will be starting us off. My name is Susan Kazeroid, for those of you who don't know who I am. I'm a literacy content lead for the Office of Literacy and Humanities. With me today is Jean Liu, who's a special education early learning and literacy supervisor, and she will be sharing information from the dyslexia guidelines with you. Donna Goldstein, who's also a literacy content lead, is joining us today, and she will be monitoring the Q&A. So please feel free, if you have any questions, to drop them into the Q&A. Use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We are reserving some time at the end of the session for questions. We may not have enough time to answer all your questions, or we may not be able to answer all of your questions, but we will be sure to gather them and respond to you. Also, in addition, on the last slide of the presentation, it includes our contact information. So please feel free to reach out to us after today if you have any questions. So we know that your students will be coming into the schools and classrooms with a variety of unique needs and experiences. Assessing where students are and then providing evidence-based literacy instruction followed by progress monitoring is critical in making sure all students have a successful literacy experience. So let's talk a little bit about universal screening or early literacy screening. This should be efficient, reliable, and administered to all students as a first step in identifying which students are at risk. Screening assessments can tell us which students will struggle in the future if they do not receive evidence-based instruction, and in some cases, intervention right now. Screeners can also tell us what instruction students now need to be on a successful track. I'm going to click on the link in the top here. That will take us to the early literacy screening assessment page. And I just want to orientate you to what's on the page. On this slide here, you can see that the headings are approved screening assessments, the master service agreement, information for vendors, and disclosure statement. So as I click on the page, you can see that you can click on any of those headings and jump to any of those areas. I also want to point out that the webinar that we did on June 23rd is also located here, in addition to the top resources, which I will show you in a bit. And then we're going to be talking about these two documents right here, the Early Literacy Universal Screening Assessment and the Early Literacy Approved Screening Assessments at a Glance documents in a little more detail in a moment. Also on this page, you can see the assessments that were approved, and you can click on any of those assessments and it will take you to the publisher's page for more information. I'm going to go back. Just wanted to quickly orientate you. So, as I just showed you earlier on the previous slide on the website, you saw these two headings. Both of these are downloadable Word documents. On the The first one, Early Literacy Universal Screening Assessment Guidance, it talks about universal screening. It talks about the process that we went through at the department for approving the screeners and reviewing them. And also there's information on the schools that were able to pilot 4 of the screeners. The second document, the Early Literacy Approved Screening Assessments at a Glance, gives you key information about each of the screeners. And I'm going to show you a little more on the next couple slides. So that first document, the Universal Screening Assessment Guidance, and again, Donna dropped the presentation, the participant presentation, into the chat so that you have the slides in addition to this webinar being posted. And so you can, many of the slides are linked so that you can get right to the pages that we're talking about. So if you're going to the Universal Screening Assessment Guidance, this gives you very clearly some quick criteria that vendor proposals were reviewed by. The criteria, these assessments needed to be valid and reliable, scientifically based, they needed to be brief, needed to have the ability to administer them at least 3 times per year, and they needed to be code and meaning based and or include rapid automatized naming. So 12 screeners have been approved as of right now. The RFR is open until December of 2021. And if you wanted to see in more detail the criteria that are listed here, you could look at Appendix A, which is attached to this document, and it gives you more detailed information and an explanation about the criteria. So again, this is that first document, the Universal Screening Assessment Guidance. So these are the approved screeners. And when you're thinking about choosing your screeners, we know that there's many things you want to think about. Which screener works well for your district? What are you already using? Do you want to use pencil and paper? Do you want a screener that can be done digitally? You want the screener to be short, but you also want to make sure it's comprehensive, and you want to make sure that you screen early. Once you screen, you want to make sure that you provide evidence-based instruction and then have the ability to progress monitor. We don't want to screen, let's say in the fall, and then hope our students make progress and wait until the next screening cycle to find out. On the next slide, you'll see an example of one of the approved screeners and some information about the screeners. Let me move to the next slide. So this is one example, and each of those 12 screeners has a page in that second document, Early Literacy Universal Screening Assessment Guidance, Approved Screening Assessments at a Glance. So each one of those 12 assessments that you saw on the previous slide has a page that looks like this. It gives detailed information about the grade span, the time it takes to administer, whether it can be given paper and pencil or digitally, the languages that it's available in, the skills that are assessed, the costs, details on professional development, and then each page at the bottom has a whom to contact for more information. At a minimum, any screener should assess letter ID or naming, phonological awareness, fluency, and word reading. So let's talk for a minute about progress monitoring. We know that an important question once you screen all students and then provide targeted instruction is the student actually making meaningful progress? Progress monitoring takes place after screening and then setting goals for individual students and after a round of evidence-based early literacy instruction is administered. The next slide shows you from that first document additional considerations for progress monitoring. You can see here that which of these 12 have the ability to progress monitor. For FastBridge, you can use pieces of some of the other assessments to progress monitor, but it doesn't have a separate progress monitoring. For Lexia, you need to have Lexia Core 5 in order to progress monitor, and NWEA MAP does not include progress monitoring. So I told you we were going to talk about some resources that will help you once you've done your screening. I don't know if you're familiar. I hope you're all familiar with the Mass Literacy Guide by now, but just in case you're not, I just want to orientate you very briefly to the Mass Literacy Guide and some places that would be helpful for you to go to around screening and instruction. So the first one, I'm going to click on the resource up top. In case mass literacy is new to you and this is your first time, let me just tell you it's a statewide effort to empower educators with the evidence-based practices for literacy that all students need. Evidence-based instruction provided within schools and classrooms that are culturally responsive and sustaining will help put our youngest students on a path towards literacy for life. As part of mass literacy over the next several years, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education will offer early literacy programming paired with implementation supports, including resources, professional development, and grants. So here's just a couple of places in this math literacy guide that will help support you. I'm going to go click on the top resources page, and I want to show you. Here you will find all of the webinars that have been done over the past year and a half. So I just want to point out that the January 7th webinar was an early literacy screening with Dr. Nadine Gobb. So this would be a great resource for many of you who want to learn more about screening. And then you can see here that the June 23rd webinar is listed here, and eventually the webinar from today will also be listed here under the Strong Start webinar from the 23rd. I apologize, I'm just going to close the window. It appears as there's airplanes flying by. Sorry about that. I also want to share with you students experiencing reading difficulties. So when you click on students experiencing reading difficulties from the Mass Literacy Guide here, you will come to these puzzle pieces. And we know that students break down in a variety of ways. For today's purposes, I'm just going to click on the phonological skills, but I just want to let you know that each of those pages is set up very similarly. So on the phonological skills page and on the other pages, you will see that there will be a section on how problems present, how they may present. You will see that they will link to screening, our screening page. You will see a section on underlying causes of difficulty, a section on preventing problems, and then a section on intervention. And you can see here on this page, we actually have a headshot and a quote from Dr. Nadine Gobb, and her dyslexia paradox interview and video from Reading Rockets is actually housed on this page. Also, there's also a link to it. So each of these pages on the Mass Literacy Guide has resources, it has research. So this is a great resource for you. And the final thing that I want to show you before we turn over to talking about the connections to the Dyslexia Guidelines is leading a multi-tiered system of support. So this page gets you to our MTSS and early literacy. So you can see that each one of these gears works together kind of as a well-oiled machine. The literacy leadership team being a little bit bigger than the rest. That's sort of the central gear that holds it all together. But if you're interested in finding more information on scheduling, staffing, and materials, professional development, you can click on any of those gears. The instruction gear gets into the 3 tiers of instruction, and there's some really good videos and resources there. But I just want to show you, for today's purposes, the database decision-making page. I want to show you here how, here's where you can see we've been talking about the universal screening, we've been talking about the progress monitoring, early identification. There's some resources here, but also right here links right to the Massachusetts Dyslexia Guidelines. So we want it to be very clear and transparent between our documents. And so you will see, as you have time to spend in the Mass Literacy Guide and the Dyslexia Guidelines, you'll see many places where the two are linked together and also linked within our MTSS work. So this is actually right in the Universal Screening Assessment Guideline, and right here clearly says a universal screening assessment will identify students at risk for future difficulties, not students with dyslexia. And upon identification of students at risk based upon early literacy screening, students should receive high quality evidence-based literacy instruction across all of the tiers. So I'm going to transition now to my colleague, Jean Liu, who will make the connection between the Mass Literacy Guide with the Dyslexia Guidelines. So I'm going to turn over control to Jean.
Thank you so much, Susan. Hey, everyone. My name is Jean. I am with the Office of Special Education Planning and Policy, and I will be taking you through the Dyslexia Guidelines. So I am going to do a quick tour of the guidelines. So the guidelines consist of 9 chapters with appendices and a glossary. And it's basically focused intentionally for general educators, but it's really all educators will find this very beneficial, as it clearly lays out exactly what dyslexia is, what kind of reading difficulties are experienced by those with dyslexia. And then it goes into the screening as well as evidence-based practices and strategies for students experiencing reading difficulties or those who do have dyslexia. And then it ends with the considerations for special education services and supports, as well as considerations for English learners. At the end of, when you do get a chance to read through this, you'll see that, as Susan has just said, that it very clearly aligns with our other guidances, such as the Massachusetts Literacy Guide and the MTSS Blueprint. At the end of each chapter, you will see references as well as links to other resources. So when you get a chance, please do check it out. Okay, let me go back and find, here we go, great. Okay. So, no, okay. So the overall purpose of the guidelines is to provide educators, especially general educators, as I just said, with evidence-based strategies and resources to meet the needs of students experiencing reading difficulties. The expectation is that by implementing the practices identified in the guidelines, schools will be in a better position to ensure that all students receive equitable and immediate access to reading support. All students receive early screening and relevant interventions as needed. All students receive the necessary literacy and language screening and interventions in the early grades that could help prevent or mitigate reading difficulties. And all students receive high quality evidence-based language and literacy instruction that would allow them to effectively engage in the general education curriculum. As I kind of just mentioned in the guidelines tour, the guideline covers screening, MTSS, progress monitoring, special education supports and services for those identified to have dyslexia, and considerations for English learners at risk for dyslexia. The National Institute of Child Health and Human Development defines dyslexia as a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. People with dyslexia often exhibit difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition, poor spelling and decoding abilities, and/or phonological and/or rapid naming deficits. The difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and in spite of effective classroom instruction. As a result, secondary consequences of dyslexia may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can further impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. However, with that said, students who experience reading difficulties and may even be identified as having dyslexia may not necessarily qualify for special education. In order to be eligible for special education services, a student must have an identified disability that affects their academic progress. To determine whether a student needs specially designed instruction through special education services and supports, teachers or parents can request a referral for an initial evaluation. From there, according to state regulations, within 30 days of receiving parental consent, the school must conduct a comprehensive initial evaluation that considers the student's primary language, assesses all areas related to the suspected disability, includes valid and reliable measures, as well as a variety of assessment tools and strategies. And for the identification of a specific learning disability or dyslexia, federal law requires that districts must permit the use of a student's response to research-based intervention as part of the initial evaluation. And districts cannot require the use of the IQ achievement discrepancy to determine whether a student has SLD or dyslexia. So these are some of the possible assessment tools. As you'll see, there is a variety, such as classroom performance and benchmark assessments, educational history, language proficiency assessments, family history of dyslexia and family input, developmental history and potential adverse experiences, norm reference psychological assessments, standardized academic assessments, speech language eval, and any need-specific rating scales. And again, remember, districts must use a variety of assessments and data sources. So in summary, special education services, again, need to be reserved for students who cannot successfully make progress in general education without specifically designed instruction. Referrals should only be made after high-quality research-based instruction has been provided within the various tiers of MTSS, unless screening measures or parent concerns warrant immediate referral. And cultural and linguistic differences must be taken into account when assessing student strengths, weaknesses, progress, and response to interventions. Thank you. So I think I'm going to give up control, Susan.
Thanks, Jean. So, Donna, do we have any questions from the Q&A?
Hey, Susan, right now there are no questions in the Q&A box.
Okay. Great. If anyone has any questions, we'll give you a minute or two to type them in the Q&A. And if there are no questions, we'll let everybody enjoy the rest of their day. Oh, here's some questions coming in, I can see.
Yes, there is a question asking if you could speak to where participants could find a letter ran that goes through grade 2.
Tracy, do you want to unmute? I'm not sure. I asked Tracy to join us today because Tracy has been the one, along with another colleague of ours, who has been working most closely with the publishers.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Could you speak to where a participant could find a letter ran that goes through grade 2?
There are some assessments that are on the approved list that have the RAN included on that assessment. And there are companies that publish them, but we don't have any that just have the letter RAN on our site. Some are included, some of our computer-based ones are included, but we don't have just a separate test for that.
Okay. Thank you. Two small questions. PDPs are not given for this session, and the recording of today's session will be posted within a week or so at the top resources section of the Mass Literacy Guide. Those are two questions that I could answer. There are other questions though. Will other approved universal screeners be added? And could someone please speak a bit about the role of the district dyslexia team?
I can answer the first question and then I'll turn it over to Jean for the second question, the second part of the question. So the right now, we are still entertaining screeners if they send it in, going through the process. I believe our deadline is December of this year. I don't know, Tracy, if you have anything else to add.
We'll be accepting application to be put onto our master service agreement, which has another name now. My apologies for not using it because I don't remember it. After that, the agreement we have now goes through June 2022, and then we will entertain accepting more applications. Just a reminder that we have approved a large number of assessments, and they are posted on the site, but it is not inclusive of all early literacy assessments. Not everybody has applied to be part of our agreement. If you're looking at something that is not on our list, I would encourage you to go to the National Center for Intensive Intervention to see if it's been listed and rated on there. But please don't use something that may be high quality because it's not on our list.
And then could you repeat the second part of that question? I'm guessing Jean can't remember at this point.
Absolutely, I would be happy to. Could someone please speak a bit to the role of the district dyslexia team?
So yeah, I'm not quite sure what they're wanting to know about district dyslexia teams. We are, it's really up to the districts, but we do recommend and it's in the guidelines that there are like screening teams as well as teams like data teams. And then eventually, of course, if the student is referred for special education eligibility, then of course there's an IEP team. So I'm not, if someone wants to elaborate on that, I could potentially provide more information.
Okay, perhaps while that person is
Okay.
doing that, we could go to one other question. What grades would be required to be assessed on a yearly basis?
Sure. So we don't use the word require. We strongly suggest at a minimum pre-K through grade 3. But that again is up to the districts. There is not a requirement.
Where might a participant go to find Tier 1 general education curricula that would meet appropriate instruction for all students, and that includes those with dyslexia or potential reading struggles?
Sure. Boy, Donna, this sounds like a question that might be handwritten for you. I don't know if you want to take it.
Sure, I would be happy to. I would recommend that people who are interested in general education Tier 1 instruction go to the Massachusetts Curate project, and I will put a link to that in the chat right now.
Thanks, Donna.
You're welcome. While I'm working on that, a question about a particular couple of more screening specific questions. The first, has Ames Web as a screener already been considered? And second, can literacy screening be part of the pre-K screening or for child find, or should it be a separate screening? So 2 questions, one about Ames Webb's consideration and if literacy screening can be part of pre-K, or should it be separate?
Sure. I'm going to see if Tracy wants to take the Ames Web question.
Ames Web has been reviewed by the department, but may be caught up in legal about what they are going to do to contract with us. So although it has been approved as an approved screener, it has not been listed because of additional issues that are legal that we cannot post it as part of our agreement.
Thank you. And Jean, did you want to take the second part of that? And Donna, you might need to repeat it again. Sorry.
Of
No, that's
course.
okay. I got it. It was about using, yeah. So child find, again, is the requirement that schools find all children who have disabilities and who may be entitled. So this would be, this can be conducted through schools, through community centers, or through pediatricians if there are any concerns that a child may have disabilities. So that the literacy screening, as far as I know, can be a part of that if, the screening measures are showing issues. And again, it's really up to the parent to really, if they are truly concerned about their child and their child's development, they can refer their child for special education evaluation at any time. And as well as, teachers can do that as well, but ultimately the parents really have the voice in getting their children assessed.
Thank you, Jean. Could you speak a little bit around the expectation for pre-K classrooms insofar as the dyslexia guidelines, the dyslexia guidance is concerned?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Absolutely. One of the participants is looking for clarity on the expectation for pre-K classrooms for the from the dyslexia guidance.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And actually, we are in the midst, the early learning team headed by Donna Trainham is working with Susan's team on an RFR that will have provide resources and strategies for the early grades. So they're looking at creating one-pagers on pre-K specific resources and strategies that are aligned with the dyslexia guidelines.
Okay, thank you. I'm doing one last look. That takes care of all of the questions that we had. And a reminder to everyone that the link to today's recording will be out in about a week at the top resources section of the Mass Literacy Guide.
Thanks, Donna, and thank you to Tracy and Jean. And we want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to join us today. As I said earlier, our contact information is also on this last slide. So if you have any further questions or need any further clarification, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And if we don't get to talk to you before the school year starts, have a great school year. Thanks, everyone.